Learning is my passion. When you have an open mind, even old materials can bring up new thoughts and ideas. As a person interested in mystery decoding, I've always been curious about Nostradamus. However, when I finally read his 942 quatrains, I was shocked at what I found. By using keywords and unconventional cluster findings, I believe I have found hidden messages about Queen Mary of Scots, Queen Catherine de' Medici and her 4 kings, and of course reconfirmed what I read about Napoleon and Hitler. Believe it or not, I have even found possible clues on the next Antichrist. So an idea came to me. If I look hard enough, maybe I can find out who killed President Kennedy. For people with an open mind, you may find my theory at least interesting, if not convincing. At least that is what I hope. I've actually found 3 quatrains about President Lincoln's assassination, right before the Kennedy quatrains. Now, let's start with Century 4, Quatrain 6, quote, "By the new close after the find is made, malicious plot and machination. First will die he who will prove it. Color Venetian trap." It is easy to link the quote, "malicious plot and machination," to the assassination of President Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth in 1865. But you can also pin that to every murder in history. Are there any other links of Lincoln's assassination to this quatrain? Of course. What do you think "by the new close after the find is made" meant? Do you know that the original plot was to kidnap Lincoln, kill Vice President Andrew, and Secretary of State William Seward, so the North government can be in total chaos? Lincoln escaped the March 20th, 1865 date when he failed to show up. So the plan changed after the South's surrender. With the country united, North and South is under the same flag and uniform again. That is the new close in the quatrain. However, Lincoln was assassinated only 5 days after General Lee's surrender. The find was made, but the clothes have not changed yet. Great quote. Now, let's look at the "first will die and he will prove it." Do you know President Lincoln was the first to die on that day at 10:15 p.m.? While around the same time, Lewis Powell arrived at Secretary Seward's home. He attacked Frederick Seward, Secretary's son, with a revolver, severely injured him, and left him in a coma for 60 days. Then he slashed George Robinson, the bodyguard, with a knife. Then he stabbed Secretary Seward several times before fleeing. Also in Lincoln's famous Gettysburg speech, he said, quote, "These dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth." So, quote, "First he will die, he who will prove it." He died for his cause. He did not die in vain. Then the interesting quote of "color Venetian trap." Don't forget the Civil War started with both sides falling under the color trap. The quote, "black and white." Isn't that an incredible way to describe the conflict? The next quatrain is 408, quote, "The great city by prompt and sudden assault. Surprised at night, guards interrupted. The guards and watches of Saint Quentin slaughtered guards and the portals broken." The assassination of Lincoln and attacks on Secretary Seward both happened in the great city of Washington, D.C. Both were surprise attacks at night around 10 p.m. In both incidents, guards were hurt or killed. While Saint Quentin is the name of an early Christian saint, a becoming quote for our assassinated president, both assassins got away after the slaughtering. Then quatrain 409, quote, "The chief of the army in the middle of the crowd will be wounded by an arrow shot in the thighs, when Geneva in tears and distress will be betrayed by Lucien and the Swiss." This one is interesting because if it is indeed about the JFK assassination, it may hold clues on who was behind it. President Kennedy, our commander-in-chief, drove through the streets of Dallas. What better description can you find than, quote, "the chief of the army in the middle of the crowd"? In the car with him was Governor John Connally, who was shot in the thigh, although not by an arrow. The mention about, quote, "Geneva in tears and distress" may simply mean the whole world mourning over his death. But it can also mean a link with some Geneva connections to his murder. In 1959, Senator Kennedy gave a speech about the other Geneva Conference, which is about the need to stop nuclear testing. Could the reference to Geneva bear any hint of a possible link of the assassination and his nuclear policies? I can't find any articles linking this quotation to JFK. You see, people won't dream of linking the peace-loving Swiss to the Kennedy assassination. The Soviets are Cuba, maybe, but not the Swiss. Betrayed by Lucien and the Swiss. What was Nostradamus smoking? Please note that Nostradamus was not writing a 16th century Wikipedia. To avoid religious persecution, he must hide his true meanings. This one I can't say for sure, but I will give you 2 clues. Other than watches and knives, what comes to your mind when you think of the Swiss? For me, it is the Swiss Guards. Since 1480, Royal Brave Swiss Guards protected royals in France, Italy, Austria, and many other countries. Even today, they are still the trusted guards for the Pope. In Nostradamus' time, they were at the French court protecting the king. So this can mean the Secret Service. The king's guard betrayed him. Now here's another surprise. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director under JFK and President Johnson, is a Swiss American. Could this mean the betrayal is by Hoover? Or the guards? Could it be both? I guess Nostradamus does not sound so crazy after all now, right? Quatrain 4:10, quote, "The young prince falsely accused will plunge the army into trouble and quarrels. The chief murdered for his support. Scepter to pacify, then to cure scrofula." What throws people off is the mention of prince. People paid little attention to things of the past. After all, it is too late for us to change anything, right? Could the young prince be the younger brother of the leader? I mean, Robert Kennedy. He and JFK were accused of plotting the assassination of Fidel Castro. Nostradamus thought Robert was falsely accused. However, records show the mafia were likely involved. Was the mafia part of the plot? More likely yes than no. Now, JFK authorized the invasion on the Bay of Pigs, which did plunge the army into trouble and quarrels. The next line seems to say who was responsible for the assassination of JFK, quote, "The chief murdered for his support." JFK withdrew his support during the Cuban invasion, which can give his enemy another reason to kill him. The next line is "scepter to pacify, then to cure scrofula." Do you know scrofula can mean the king's evil, while scepter to pacify seems to mean an official put out a story to calm the anger down. Is this the reason for the Warren Commission issuing such a ridiculous report? Quatrain 4:11, quote, "He who will have the government of the great cope will be prevailed upon to perform several deeds. The 12 red one will come to soil the cloth. Under murder, murder will come to be perpetrated." Despite the short time serving as president, JFK accomplished several very difficult and remarkable tasks, just as stated in the first two lines of the quatrains. And then the mention of 12 red ones got my attention. I believe soil the cloth means conflicts. So I started to count the number of communist countries during the Cold War era. Excluding China, Yugoslavia, and Albania, which were hostile against the Soviets. You have the Soviet Union, Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Cuba, North Korea, North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. These are 12 red countries, as stated in the quatrain. And since both JFK and Robert Kennedy were murdered, the quote, "Under murder, murder will come to be perpetrated," showed another chilling prophecy fulfilled. The next quatrain is quatrain 4:12, and it could be applied to many losing battles, but I think it is about the Vietnam War. Quote, "The greater army put to fight in disorder, scarcely further will it be pursued. Army reassembled and the legion reduced, then it will be chased out completely from the Gauls." Okay, I know you must think I'm on drugs. What does Vietnam have anything to do with the Gauls, which is the modern-day France? Well, Vietnam was a French colony until 1954, so to Nostradamus, it's part of the Gauls. Just like the last one, I believe quatrain 4:13 is about the Vietnam War under President Johnson. Quote, "News of the great loss reported. The report will astonish the army. Troops united against the revolted. The double phalanx will abandon the great one." Again, this can mean any other war, but clustered with JFK, it is most likely the Vietnam War. When America was shocked by the loss and defeats in Vietnam, President Johnson lost public support and had no choice but to abandon his re-election plans. Quatrain 4:14 may be a reference to Robert Kennedy, quote, "The sudden death of the first personage will have caused a change and put another in the sovereignty. Soon, late come so high and of low age, such by land and sea that it will be necessary to fear him." After the assassination of JFK, Robert Kennedy became the obvious next to run for president in the Kennedy family. But he was late in that decision and did not announce it until February 29, 1968, when his opponent, Senator George McGovern of South Dakota, started a campaign in November 1967. Although he was late, he had major victories and was about to secure the Democratic nomination. He was only 43, a low age, but carries high hope. The quatrain sounded like election front page news, late come, so high and of low age, right? His enemies had good reasons to fear, as he vowed to find the truth about the JFK assassination. Then the quatrains moved to the 1975 refugee crisis after the fall of Saigon. Quatrain 4:15, quote, "From where they will think to make famine come, from there will come the surfeit, the eye the sea through Cain greed, for the one the other will give oil and wheat. To escape by boat, the refugees had to give everything they had to the greedy smugglers in exchange for oil and wheat. Vietnam after the fall of Saigon was chaotic." Quatrain 4:16, quote, "The city of liberty made servile, made the asylum of profligates and dreamers. The king changed to them not so violent. From 100 became more than thousands." To escape the famine and violence, they ran to the country with the status of liberty for the whole world to see. Do you know how many Vietnamese immigrants the USA accepted from 1975 to 1980? 230,000. Do you know how many are in the USA as of 2014? 1.3 million. So it is quite true that the refugees grew from hundreds to thousands. The people who risked their lives are dream seekers, and they got asylum at their new homeland. Nostradamus is really a great prophet. Now you will really be speechless when you see the next quatrain. Quatrain 4:18, quote, "To change at Beaune, Newts, Chi, Lone, and Dijon. The Duke wishing to improve the Carmelite, marching near the river fish diver's beak, will see the tail, the gate will be locked." If JFK was the king, Robert Kennedy was the prince, what should we call Ted Kennedy? Duke, right? And how do people call JFK Jr.? Prince of Camelot? With Nostradamus' spelling record, I'm not surprised to see Camelot as Carmelite. So this must be about Ted Kennedy. So what was that quatrain about? In 1969, a single-vehicle car accident involving Ted Kennedy and his 28-year-old companion, Mary Jo Kopechne. Ted was fine, but Mary Jo drowned. However, a diver's testimony indicated she died of suffocation. Does it sound like the diver has a big beak? That accident ended Ted Kennedy's presidential dream, as the gate to that path was forever locked. As we showed you, Quatrain 4:06, 4:07, and 4:08 reviewed details about Lincoln's assassination. 4:09 warned about JFK assassination. 4:10 talked about the Kennedys and the Bay of Pigs, the JFK murder and the Warren Commission cover-up. Quatrain 4:11 talked about the Cold War and the JFK murder. Quatrain 4:12 and 4:13 are about the Vietnam War, with 4:14 talking about RFK's murder and his presidential campaign. Then 4:15 and 4:16 was about the Vietnam refugee crisis, with the last one at Quatrain 4:17 about Ted Kennedy's car accident and the end of his presidential dream. You may ask me, why should we care about these things which happened in the past? We can't do anything to change them, even if what you said was true. Think this way. If we can decode these warnings, we may be able to decode more warnings before they happen. And now, based on what we decoded so far, do you know who killed JFK? Personally, I believe the Secret Service and J. Edgar Hoover were behind the plot. As revealed in Quatrain 4:09 about the Swiss, it definitely has something to do with the Bay of Pigs. While the Warren Commissioner probably knew the truth, but decided to cover it up. And most likely, Bobby Kennedy was killed by the same group who feared his revenge. Well now, tell me the truth. Do you believe Nostradamus can see the future? This is Ken Peters. Thank you for watching.